Okay, so thank you for joining us. My name is Sigal Seged. I'm the chair of the research forum at the Lillian Lodge Copenhagen Center for the Advancement of Women in Communications. I'm happy to present to you Lauren Pastrana, an Emmy-nominated multimedia journalist from WFOR TV, which is also CBS4, who will share with us some of her insights and experience on moving forward in the news profession. Lauren is a Miami native. She returned to South Florida from Fort Myers, where she worked for WINK TV, a CBS affiliate, as a reporter, as well as a fill-in anchor. Before her stint in Southwest Florida, Ms. Pastrana was a reporter and afternoon news anchor at WIOD, where she covered everything from the Super Bowl to local political corruption. She also spent a season as an in-stadium reporter for the show Miami Dolphins Game Day Live. Ms. Pastrana was awarded for the 4-year Scholar Award from the University of Florida, recognition for graduating summa cum laude. So we have an exceptional student here, right? A role model. Throughout her studies in Gainesville, she anchored and reported for WUFT TV and was part of the team responsible for launching a Spanish language web-based news service targeting Alachua and the surrounding counties. Join me in welcoming Lauren Pastrana.
I'm gonna sit, if that's okay with you guys. I'm short, so that's a little too tall for me. And hearing your bio is always the most awkward thing in the world. Thank you very much. But it never gets easier to hear people talking.
Try the reading of it. Yeah.
So you kind of get the gist there of where I've been and what I've done, a little synopsis of my short career in the grand scheme of things. I mean, there have been people doing this for many, many more years than I've been doing this so far, and I look up to them. They're the reporters that I grew up watching, and now I get to work alongside them. So that's really, really exciting for me, and it's exciting for me to see all of you ladies interested in taking this business and this career into the future. A lot of changes coming, but I think that if you're here, you're interested in those changes and you're ready to take that leap. So it's great to see you all here today. When I was coming here today, I've been here to this campus before for different events, not one where I've spoken before, but for different events. And even though, as she mentioned, I'm a Miami native, I still have to look up things on a map. I know, it's very embarrassing, but I typed in the address into Google Maps. I'm sure you guys have done this before. And when you type something into Google Maps, you get 3 or 4 different options for how to get where you're going, right? How many people ever look at 2, 3, or 4? No, of course not. Because the first option's got to be the fastest way, less traffic, a few extra minutes. You don't want to add that to your commute, especially not in Miami, as we were talking about a few minutes ago. So you always go with option number 1. Well, I became a much happier person in this business when I realized that you got to look past option number 1 when it comes to your career path. Your journey is going to be different from everyone else's. You can't watch and see what someone else did and think, oh, well, Lauren did that and look where she is now, or so-and-so did this and she's got a great career. You really have to sort of carve your own path, forge your own way, and be okay with the fact that your journey is going to look very different than everyone else's. So that's something that it took me a while to learn, so I'll just tell you a little bit about my journey. I went to the University of Florida. The entire time, I'll say the last 2 years at the University of Florida, I was also working at WIOD Radio down here in South Florida, so I would drive back and forth every other weekend. But I thought, if I want a job in this business in Miami right after graduation, these are the things I have to do. And I kept telling myself that it'll all pay off in the end, it'll pay off right when I graduate, I'm going to be working on TV in Miami. No, that is not what happened. I graduated, and in those months leading up to graduation, I sent out, I don't know how many resume tapes, which is not cheap because it wasn't YouTube links back then. And it wasn't that long ago, but they still wanted a VHS tape of all things, which were expensive to ship because they were heavy, and then dubbing them over was a nightmare. And I probably sent out, I'd say, at least 75 resume tapes. Yeah. At least 75 resume tapes. Thankfully, you only have to make one tape and then just keep copying it over and over and over. But the process of making the tape in and of itself was interesting, to say the least. Many late nights in the editing bays at UF. But I sent out a bunch of tapes and crickets. I didn't get anything from Miami, of course. I was living in a fantasy land. Not to say that you can't, because some people's journey, again, they could pick that number 1 on Google Maps and they just, good for them. They get that job right out of the gate. But for me, I got a couple markets, a couple offers in some very small markets, Gainesville being one of them. I seriously considered staying, and something just told me this isn't the right path for me. So I left Gainesville, I graduated, and I came to Miami, still had that part-time radio gig that I was doing every other weekend. And within about a month of being here, they're like, hey, you thinking about doing full-time for us now that you're here? Of course, why didn't I ever think of that? That idea had never even crossed my mind, because I was so focused on, if I want to be a TV reporter, this is what I need to do. I need to send out tapes, and I need to do it this way. So I'm very thankful that my news director at the time at that station, Lori Shepard at WIOD, gave me the opportunity to go from being a every other weekend traffic reporter to being a 3-day-a-week reporter and 2-day-a-week or weekend anchor for WIOD. So I did that for about a year. Then they moved me to Monday through Friday reporter, and I thought, I've hit the big time, like Monday through Friday, this is so exciting. And that's when I started going out, really out into the field and seeing all those reporters that I really admired growing up, and I started asking them questions and what could I do to sort of break into the business. They're like, do what you're doing. And that's really when I learned everyone's way is different. I heard so many stories of, oh, I was an assistant at a TV station and I got the job, or I worked in a newspaper and that's how I got this job. So it was really a learning experience, very eye-opening to see from these people who I thought, oh, they hadn't made working here in Miami, that they also had their own path that they had to work out for themselves. So after that, they put me to anchor Monday through Friday afternoons. So I was really excited about that, but then that itch came of, I need to get into TV. How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? So I got those old tapes from 2 years before, my college stuff, and I put that together and I sent those out. Of course, didn't hear from very many people because the tape was 2 years old. I'd been working in radio. And that's when you start to have those doubts. Like, maybe I did the wrong thing. Maybe radio wasn't the right way to go. Maybe I should have moved to Montana like my friend did and take that job in that really, really, really tiny market in the freezing cold. And now she's doing great. That is a true story. She went to Montana, then to Missouri, and now she's in North Carolina. So you can make that progression. But I sent out some tapes and I said, okay, I'm going to focus on Florida, all of Florida. I decided to broaden my horizons and not just think about Miami anymore. And I zeroed in on Fort Myers. And when I finally sent those tapes to Fort Myers and got over the idea of not wanting to leave Miami, that's when things started coming. And I got offers from Palm Beach, and I got offers from Fort Myers and from Pensacola. And in the end, I ended up choosing Fort Myers, but it was not just oh, here's a contract, come work for us. No, the people who I decided to go with didn't want to hire me off the bat. They wanted me to freelance first, because they said, your tape is 2 years old. What if you don't even know how to do this anymore? A lot has changed since then. So I went there for 2 weekends in August, hot as hell. And I was shooting my own video, editing my own stuff, and just trying to remember what I'd learned at UF. Thankfully, I remembered most of it. And after 2 weekends of doing that, they said, you want to come on board and work full time? I'd never heard of anyone taking a freelance route like that, working 2 weekends and just seeing what would happen. It worked out for me. I ended up leaving Miami. My husband, I had gotten married in that time that I was working at the radio station. I left him here, which is another crazy thing, but it worked out. Moved over to Fort Myers and worked there for almost 2 years, and then it got in my head again, I gotta get back to Miami. It was one of those things that never really went away. But now I had all this experience under my belt, and I'd made so many great contacts, my news director, assistant news director, and that's key. Having those people who are on your side, rooting for you, they're your advocates when you want to move on to that next market. Sure, they don't want to lose a good employee, but at the same time, they know that you've done your part for them and they're willing to help you out. So be sure to nurture that relationship with your boss when you can, and with your professors as well. That is equally as important. But the moment came where I was offered a job in Miami. I was so excited. It was in radio again. So I actually came back. I took a radio job again with WIOD, but this time it was the morning anchor position, and that's the sweet spot when you're thinking radio. That's when people are in their cars, on their way to work, the biggest audience. So I went for it, and I moved back to Miami, and a month later, Channel 4 called me. After I had taken this job at a radio station, which had given me my start, so I felt like I couldn't just leave them. That was just going to be terrible. So between March and November of 2012, I did both. I worked 80 hours a week. I was working Monday through Friday for WIOD Radio. I would anchor in the mornings from 4:30 in the morning to 12:30 in the afternoon. Go to my parents' office in Hialeah to have some good Cuban food for lunch and to change my clothes. And then I would work nights at Channel 4, 2:30 to 11:30. That was 3 nights a week that I did that, and then I worked weekends. So I was working 7 days a week. 3 of those days, it was just nonstop work, and I would sleep for a little bit. People kept telling me, "You're crazy. What are you thinking? Like, no one does it this way." My husband was one of them, saying, "There are people who work on TV all the time, and they're not doing what you're doing." And I said, "Well, this is my way. This is my path." And I think that it has paid off for me in the end. I think I definitely earned the respect of my colleagues, of my news director, who I believe you guys had the pleasure of chatting with a couple weeks ago, Liz Roldan. So when the time came and CBS Network finally decided that they were ready to offer the position, because when you're in an owned and operated station, it's not just up to your boss here locally. It's many, many people outside of the newsroom who have a say in whether or not you have a job. Someone you've never met is watching you, and I'm sure if it's print, someone from the company who owns the newspaper is reading your stuff, someone you've never met before, and they're going to have a say in whether or not you keep your job. So eventually that did become my full-time job, and I'm very glad to say that I'm back to sleeping like a normal person. But all that to say, my path was very different than any of my friends. I have a great friend at Channel 4 who her one and only job was at Channel 4. She graduated from UF just like I did, and she ended up there. She took a job as an assignment editor, and then it slowly became a reporter position, and now she does all sorts of special projects and things like that. And then there are other people, like my other friend, who had to move halfway across the country into the freezing cold. So as I was preparing this speech, I was curious to know what other women in this business have had to do to get started. And I just looked up a few. Katie Couric was a desk assistant at ABC, so not on camera at all, and we all know how that turned out. She's been on camera everywhere. Oprah was in radio in Nashville. She started in radio in high school. Diane Sawyer did the weather, which to me, I can't even imagine Diane Sawyer doing the weather, telling you your hair might be frizzy today. But then she was bored. When I read her bio, basically Diane Sawyer was bored of the local news rut, which sometimes you can get into that. I mean, especially here in Miami, it's a lot of bleeds at leads and sadness and stuff like that. And Diane Sawyer got tired of that, so she moved to Washington, D.C., tried to get a job thinking, oh, me and my journalism chops, I'm going to do so great here. She did not get hired, but she ended up becoming assistants to many, many political figures, including Richard Nixon. So, and then she has obviously made a great name for herself as well. And then Barbara Walters was a receptionist in an ad agency. So outside of the journalism spectrum, still, I mean, advertising, PR, we're all kind of connected in a way. But that's what she did before she went on to really pave the way for women in this business. And then one story that really strikes me, and she's a little more current, I guess you could say. Does anyone know who Elizabeth Hasselbeck is? Mm-hmm. Okay. She was on Survivor. Of all the ways to start your career, she was on Survivor. I guess if she can survive, I think she was in Borneo, you can survive this business. But she was on Survivor. She then went on to, I believe it was a fashion kind of TV show, The Look for Less, on the Style Network. So basically she'd take you to like TJ Maxx and say, here, you can create a designer outfit for $20. And that was her show. And then her agent decided, I think you'd be great in a more talk show news setting. She auditioned for The View and they loved her. And then she got to sit there with Barbara Walters after coming from Survivor. So I wonder what that dynamic was like. I mean, I think we saw a little bit of it on camera, but it's interesting to see how you can come from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, to where they are today. She's now on Fox and Friends, and their ratings are through the roof. They're doing a lot better than they were previously. Their ratings have gone up. So she's in a news setting now, never studying that. She used to be a shoe designer for Puma.
Oh my God.
So it's all a matter of when you decide that this is what you want to do, just going at it with all you can, with all you have. I'm pretty sure that's what she's done, and that's why she's been so successful. You can have your opinions of her ideals and her different opinions as well, but for the most part, she is a success in this business who took a very different route to get to where she is today. So I think it's just pretty cool to see these women who are doing so well, achieving so much success, coming from all different places. So that's my spiel for you guys. I really prefer questions. I hope you guys have a lot of them because it's journalism school after all. So.
What did you say to your employer at the radio station when you were thinking of taking on Channel 4? Did you tell them that you
was
were?
a delicate conversation. When I first came over, when she offered me the job, this was my boss who I'd had before, so she knew that I had left in the first place to take a TV job. But when she offered me the job, she knew that TV was where I wanted to be eventually. She did ask that I could commit for a certain amount of time. In this business, you sign non-competes. So they had originally asked me to sign a non-compete for radio and TV. I said I would not sign it if it said TV. Sometimes, I mean, you gotta put your foot down. It was a very awkward conversation, but I had them take the TV line out of my non-compete. And so they knew from the get-go, even before I started working for them, that this was gonna be something that I was gonna continue to actively pursue, that I wouldn't leave them high and dry in the middle of, with no time to find a replacement. I stayed there for many, many months, and it actually worked out really well because the woman who I replaced in the first place, something happened with her gig that she was doing, and right as I was leaving, she found herself needing a job, and she's back to doing the old job. Okay. So the timing really worked out, but it was just a matter of keeping her in the loop. I have a friend who was trying to do something similar and freelance here and there, and she didn't want to tell her other boss. Like, you can't not say, what if she's watching the news one day and she sees you? Like, you can't risk that. So I think it's a matter of keeping the lines of communication open, letting them know from the get-go what you really want, and making sure that when you're there at the radio station, in my case, I'm giving my 100% to the radio station. And I would work extra if needed, if it didn't interfere, and we would work things out. And sometimes I was on a story for TV, and they'd call me, say, hey, Lauren, we see that you're out there, can you just give us a little debrief? And if my boss at Channel 4 was okay with it, I would do that too. So it's just a matter of making everyone happy.
So you are allowed to work for different stations and different mediums, because I see it all the time.
You can.
Yeah, I used to work, I worked for football season at CBS Interactive, for CBSSports.com.
Okay.
And I don't know if you know Joanna Gomez. She's
she's everywhere. She's on every channel.
She's on HeTV, she's on Local 10. She's now on a radio station.
6. She's on 106.7. She's a great example, actually.
I was wondering how that's possible.
Yeah, I mean,
they listen.
It's everyone, I'm sure, has a different way of setting it up. It all depends on what your contract says. Like, I can't be on 4 and Channel 6 at the same time because of my news director and what my contract stipulates. But I'm sure in Joanna's case, for example, and I'm just using her as an example because I know she's well known as far as she does. I want to say HeTV's on Sun Sports, right?
Yes.
So she's on Sun Sports. Now she's on NBC 6 in the Mix sometimes. She does 106.7. And those are all different entities with different owners. But I think she's put herself in a position where she's not contracted maybe with each of them. I don't know if that is the case. But I know that is an option. You could just be freelance for a lot of people. And it just, I believe there's another reporter, what's her name? Kelly Blanco from Channel 6, she does traffic, and she used to do a lot of those similar sports things, and she'd go, I think she did maybe Marlins Vision or one of those types of things. So I used to work for the Dolphins, and I was able to work for the Dolphins while I was working for WIOD.
Right.
So it's just a matter of letting everyone know. Just don't keep it a secret, and you could usually work something out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you think, because I'm studying journalism, and most of what we learn is newspaper writing. So in terms of getting started, I've heard a lot from teachers that one of the best things you can do is work at a small newspaper or work at a radio station. What is your view on how to get started from somebody who's trying to figure out where to go?
Well, it depends. Do you want to be a newspaper journalist? Do you want to be a broadcast journalist? So
I kind of want to do it all.
hey, there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with
I'd
that.
love to do both at one point or another. I'd love to get into both.
There's now, especially with newspapers and with the internet, there's so many avenues where you could have your writing published online through so many different blogs and websites. So I don't think that you just doing that limits you from going and interning at a radio station or interning at a TV station. And honestly, and I'm probably biased, but I highly recommend working at a radio station or interning if you can at a radio station, because that for me was my real learning ground of how to write concise, how to just get to the point, leave out all the flowery stuff. Not to say that that's not great in certain stories. I mean, obviously sometimes that makes for a really entertaining way to tell someone's story, but it really helped me. I mean, we had 20 seconds to get the news across. So that really helped me in tightening up my writing and using active voice and keeping listeners engaged, because when they don't have that visual, you have to paint the picture for them without wasting words or time. So I definitely think that you can do both, but I would encourage radio if that's something that you have the opportunity to do. I know at a lot of universities, I don't know if FIU has like a college station or anything like that. Go there. That's where I started at UF, and that was the best for me.
Great, thank you.
With so many media outlets nowadays and so much information coming in and out and changing, what do you prefer to use for your sources and your sort of like when you have to write your own stories, or even in a personal matter when you want to go out and like look at what's going on in the real world? What do you use?
All the social media and Twitter. My boss loves Twitter. It's great for getting the initial spark of information and, oh, so this is going on, what's that? Or, oh, someone just tweeted that this happened. To me, the only good source is a human source who can tell me and who has some sort of connection to the case or to the story. I mean, if I'm going to attribute it to someone, I would never, I mean, I wouldn't, but some people do. Oh, according to this Twitter account handle so-and-so, this is the so-and-so is running for president or something. I mean, that's just an off-the-wall example, but I would always prefer to confirm sources with an actual person too, preferably, if you can do that. And for the and it doesn't have to just be you. We had a story not too long ago where I had a source saying it, but I only had one, and then I had two other colleagues who each had one source. We were able to sort of figure out that our sources were three different people, but we wouldn't tell each other who our sources were because we're very protective of that. But we figured out there are three different people, so instead of me saying I have sources confirming X, Y, and Z, it became CBS 4 has sources confirming this, because it came from multiple different people. So it's about working together in that sense. But when you do have a good source, hold on for dear life.
Well, I worked in the news business for a long time before I came back to school. And your stories remind me of how I started to get in. And it was a bit unconventional. I was in Atlanta, actually. And I tried, just like you, dozens of times to get in, nothing worked. Maybe even I had many interviews. And one day, I didn't think about it. It was not planned. I just essentially waited at the entrance.
Mm-hmm.
This was though pre-9/11, so there wasn't really like security. Mm-hmm. And asked folks there when they came out, I've interviewed here, I really want to work here, I'm excited about working here. What's the one job that nobody wants in this building?
That's a good strategy.
And they told me, logging tapes in the library overnight. Okay, but the problem is, maybe it's not a problem. At that time, this company, it's Turner Broadcasting, CNN, would hire mostly from within and promote from within. So coming from outside was very difficult. So once you were in the building, you had all these opportunities going on. So I said, okay, can you get a number for me? They got me a number. I spoke to this person in 2 weeks. I was in a job in the building.
Wow.
I was saying I followed everything. the right attire, interviewing many times. Nothing seemed to work. They're just like off the cuff. I thought I'd share that.
No, that's a great example and a great point to the fact of sometimes you just need to get in the building.
Yeah.
I had so many people tell me, do whatever, like
Yeah.
be an assistant, just get your foot in the door. But by the same token, I'd have people say, no, you don't. If you want to be a reporter, go be a reporter. You have to go pay your dues somewhere else. So I was always so torn. I don't know if you ever got that, people telling you, no, you can't do it this way. You have to, this is the path and you got to follow it this way. But there are very unconventional ways of doing things,
Yeah.
the equivalent of a cold call, but actually show up.
I wanted to follow up with that. What's the most unconventional, scenario that you've heard where someone's breaking into the business? What have they done that's like unusual?
Well, I've heard of people just
Yeah.
calling, just calling or showing up. When I believe it was SFL TV, was that the name of the station? They had like a morning show. It didn't last very long, but it was part of the Sun Sentinel and I think Channel 39, one of those stations.
They rebranded it
yeah.
as like Eye Open or
Exactly, something to that effect. But back when they had this morning show, a friend of mine who was trying to get the job, he just showed up. He showed up with his tape and just said, I'll wait. He waited like 5 hours. Finally, he was able to at least hand his tape to a person, and he ended up getting a job. So it depends. Sometimes people will not appreciate that at all. Sometimes they'll be like, why is this person
You're
still
right.
there? But sometimes, like, for example, when I was applying for a job at Channel 10, I sent in my tape, hadn't heard anything, but I heard they're looking for a traffic reporter. And in Fort Myers, I had done a lot of traffic. So I thought, okay, perfect. Like, why wouldn't they want me? I'm from Miami. I know all the roads in Miami. What are you talking about? So I thought that I'm perfect for this job, and I really tried to sell that in my cover letter and when I sent an updated tape with all sorts of traffic stuff, and I just wasn't hearing anything back. And then my assistant news director volunteered to call on my behalf to this news director, and I said, awesome, great. Did not appreciate that at all. Some people just don't, and some people do, but in this case, it did not work out for me. I obviously didn't get the job there. But my assistant news director told me, he's like, yeah, I don't think that person works well in a calling scenario like that. They have their idea of what they're looking for, and you're not it, so sorry. And that's another thing. When I took the job at Channel 4, I learned that sometimes news directors they have a specific vision in mind of who they're looking to hire. When I was being hired at Channel 4, there was the position for a morning weekend news reporter because we were relaunching our weekend morning show. So when she met me, she thought, oh, she'd be a great fit for the morning. Young girl from Miami, knows the area. I'd probably be covering a lot of fun events, like the walks and the charity things that happen on Saturday and Sunday mornings. After a few weeks of me actually reporting there, she's like, you're working at night. I'm not putting you on mornings. But they have a very specific vision of what they want, and it took me a long time to just understand, okay, maybe I didn't get that job because I didn't fit what they needed. It's not because I'm worse or better than someone else. It's just they needed a man, and I'm not. I mean, I can't help it. so sometimes that's just how it works out.
And I can give you another real example. Well, I obviously moved on from logging tapes. I moved into the newsroom. Once again, once you're in the building, it's a totally different story.
Especially at CNN. Yeah.
So I moved into the newsroom, and then I became a promoter, like a promo producer.
Okay.
But one thing you're saying here is very clear, is I would need to audition people to do voices for the promos that I would produce. So people would have great voices, but they didn't fit the message that I was putting out in the 30-second spot. But
Yeah.
what you're trying to say.
Mhm.
It's not that they weren't good, they didn't fit.
It's not right for that, exactly.
Okay, let me move a little bit to connect our talk to the center and the mission of the center now, to redirect it a little bit to a different focus. And if you could share with us your experience that you had as a woman in the news business. Do you see any differences? Do you see any challenges that women might face compared to male professionals that are working in the news business? Do you see anything that might be different, and don't tell me that there are no differences.
It's not that there are no differences, but I will say, as far as challenge in the sphere of what I do for my job, I don't feel like I'm at sort of any sort of disadvantage by being a woman or anything to that effect, because of all those other women that I talked about before. They're the ones who were at a disadvantage, so they work so hard so I wouldn't have to have that sort of struggle in getting into this business. I never once felt that I couldn't be in this business because I was a woman. I will say that when you start to think of, oh, well, I'd like to have a family, and oh, what if I want to have kids? Oh, but wait, my contract is up at this time. I can't be on maternity leave when my contract is up. What if they don't hire me again? So those are things that I think about that I know men don't obviously have to worry about. And just also the idea of family. I got married and left, and for some people, they see it okay if the man leaves to go work and go on all kinds of business trips. But for me, with my Cuban family, oh my goodness, it was like you're going, I should take that back, not my side of the family, but my husband's side of the family. They're like, you're gonna leave? You're gonna move away? Why? But I'm pretty confident that if it's the other way around, no one would bat an eye. They would just think, oh, he's going to earn for his family. So I'd say in that sense that was a little bit of a challenge, more on the family side of things. I actually feel like being a woman in this business works to my advantage, in the sense that I feel like people are more comfortable talking to me sometimes than some of my male counterparts. I can get a cop on a crime scene to tell me something that maybe he wouldn't tell somebody else, or I can get a politician to give me 2 minutes when he was just going to storm out the door. So, and some days they won't tell me anything, and sometimes they'll storm right by me. But I feel like it has worked out. I don't play it up in any way. I am just myself. But I think that the days of really feeling like it's a negative to be a woman in the business, thankfully, are over. So, and with centers like this teaching about how it used to be and how it's going to be and how it is now, I think that that every day that gap shrinks, I think.
I just started writing for the school newspaper, and for me, one of the most difficult things is getting interviews, getting people to talk to me, to open up, to give me a minute of their time when they're sitting studying or when they're in their offices, especially if it's a faculty member or an instructor. And sometimes I feel like a nuisance. I feel like I'm annoying people, like I'm bothering people, and I don't want to be super aggressive because I don't want to be that girl going in on somebody's time and interrupting them and being a nuisance. So how do you, have you ever felt that way? How not aggressive, but how straightforward do you have to be to get your interviews, and how do you kind of compromise that?
I think this goes back to being the difference between men and women. I don't think a man would ever think he's being a nuisance.
Yeah.
I don't think a man would just be like, I need an interview. No, right? Come on, you guys don't consider yourself nuisances, do you? So I don't think, it depends really on the story. If it's a story where, sure, you'd like to interview this one person, but there are 10 other experts who would be great too, go for it and try that one person and give a couple of phone calls, a couple emails, follow up. If they don't want to do it, move on to the next. You have a deadline, so you have to keep moving forward. But if it's a scenario like a politician who doesn't want to talk to you and they're blowing you off, show up at their office, knock on their door, do what you got to do, be as aggressive as you need to be, because at the end of the day, it's your job to tell that story. And if they're so reluctant to talk to you, that's got to raise a whole bunch of red flags. In that scenario, sometimes it's just people who aren't comfortable doing interviews, especially on camera. People, I'll ask them for an interview all the time, and they'll say, sure. When I show up with a camera, they're like, what do you mean? I didn't know there was a camera. Like, we're a TV station. Of course we're going to have a camera. So sometimes it could be that they're not trying to hide anything from you. It could just be they're really uncomfortable by the idea of doing interviews. But I say be persistent. If that's the interview you need, go for it as much as you can, and explain to them, do you really want to say we reached out to so-and-so, but he refused to comment? That looks very bad sometimes. So mention that always. After you've tried a few times, be like, well, I'm going to have to put in the story that you declined to comment.
Okay.
So, usually works.
Thank you.
Going off of that question too, how do you turn an interview, because anyone can ask, oh, how are you affiliated with this person, how do you turn an interview into a great interview that's going to make people want to listen in or watch your segment?
Well, you have to listen to what the person's saying. I think sometimes, and I did this when I was first starting, especially in radio, because they couldn't see me, so I'd write down all my questions and I'd do the questions over the phone. And I would just read the questions, and then I'd go back and I'd log all the audio, and I'd be like, oh wow, he said this. I totally could have followed up by asking him about this. So I think it's about really paying attention, because you could catch them in, sometimes you can catch them in a lie, sometimes you can catch a whole other little nugget that could become really what the story is about. You ask them about one thing and really it can spiral off in an entirely different direction. What makes a good interview? I mean, it depends. I don't have an answer for that. If I ever find the answer to what is a good interview, I will let you know. That's a good question.
Yes. Her and I actually did a story for a class a week ago. We just turned in the paper yesterday, but it was on the how Florida is going to have medical marijuana on the ballot in November. How would you personally approach somebody in that situation to just ask people off the street? Because that's what we had to do. I went to a mall.
Oh, that's what we do. We just go up to people. Man on the street sound. You will have reporters who love it. You will have reporters who hate it. It depends on the story of whether or not I like Man on the Street or not. I mean, sometimes they'll make you do a story about the weather, and obviously you go and talk to people. Oh, is it cold outside? Did you have to? Whatever. I mean, silly questions. So in a story like that, just go up to people. I mean, and a wide variety of people. Because I sometimes go to Dolphin Mall, because it's right by our station if we need MOS, and it's outside, so we have the luxury of sort of moving around. And I try and make sure that I'm not getting the same people. I mean, there are a lot of young people at the mall. Make sure you get their grandma, and make sure you get a parent with a bunch of little kids. Make sure you get the teens, the mix of people. It's awkward.
Well, what's the first thing you say though?
Hey, I'm Lauren with Channel 4 working on a story about medical marijuana. Can I ask you some questions? And they'll probably be like, what? Just try to make it fast, because you just want to go. And that's the thing with us, we won't record unless someone is okay with us recording. So, but for the most part, they see the camera, they know who I'm with. Sometimes I guess in newspaper, it would be a little bit different, because you're just walking up to them, either maybe you're recording on your phone or with a little recorder. So you just, just stop people. I know it's awkward.
Yeah, no, that's the aspect though that I was talking about, because with print, like I want to go into broadcast, that's why I'm here, but when I had a TV internship at a small station in Beatty, it's a little easier in the sense that, I had the camera, so it felt a little bit more authoritative, I guess you would say. A little bit easier than just saying, oh, I have a recorder and I have, piece of paper.
Well, not to say that a press pass gives you any sort of authority whatsoever, because I've worn mine and they've been like, but if it makes you feel more comfortable, maybe like your ID with that says like press or something like that. I don't know if the school, if you work for, if you have anything, just to have that, just so you can kind of be like, I'm not some creepy person just asking you about drugs. But for the most, like you mentioned, it is more comfortable going up to someone with a camera. But when I worked at the radio station, we had, tiny little recorders up at UF. Here we had these big Marantz things, and they were terrible. But and we would just go up to people. You just introduce yourself, and if you're shy to introduce yourself, then that's something you need to work on. I don't think you are, but I'm just saying in general.
It's like the first thing you think of to ask after you introduce yourself. It's a little bit different being a student, because you don't exactly have that, title.
Yeah.
But
hey, I'm a student journalist. Doesn't matter. Don't discount yourself.
Do you still get nervous when you do a live shot, let's say, or when you're in that moment? Is there still that nerve inside of you?
Not as nervous as I am right now. This is way more intimidating than just me and the photographer with the camera. I could just pretend that no one's watching. Like, I don't get nervous in the sense of, I hope I don't stumble over my words or something. I hope I don't mess up a fact. Because when you're speaking from memory, it's very easy, you say something incorrect, and that to me is absolutely unacceptable. So that's sometimes when I get nervous, if I know I'm doing a story where in my intro I'm putting a lot of important information that needs to be right, or let's say we got a statement from someone last minute, so coming out of our story we're going to read the statement, and we didn't have enough time to make a graphic, and I just kind of need to make sure, I will read it. It doesn't look good, but if you want to make sure that their statement comes across the way that they gave it to you, then I'll do that. But those are really only the times I get nervous. it's fun at the end of the day.
Here at the center and also in class, Professor Kupenhaver has told us like how important it is to get a mentor or to get somebody to look up to, somebody that can just guide you. Who would you say is your mentor throughout your career? Who has been your person to look up to?
I was talking to her about it before this seminar started. I didn't have one, and it is one of my biggest regrets, not having a mentor. Because I was sort of all over the place in college with working at the station, taking 18 credits a semester because I was crazy, and then coming down to Miami every other weekend to report, and then trying to have a life and have friends. Like, I never really put the effort in to create a relationship with a mentor. And I have so many friends now who are in the business who have mentors who they're a sounding board for them all the time. Oh, should I apply for this job? Should I do this? When it was me doing this, I had my mom, and I love her, but she didn't study this. She didn't really know, understand the concept that I was going to have to maybe move away to a very small market. So I would definitely encourage it if you can. You should be able to. Just finding someone here. It's my biggest journalism school regret that I did not create a relationship with a mentor when I had the chance. That's for sure.
Why did you choose Fort Myers?
Because Fort Myers gave me a job.
Well, why did you look for Fort Myers?
Well, when I was applying, when I finally had worked in radio for a little bit and decided, okay, I'm going to try TV again, I decided on applying to different stations in Florida. Before I expanded, I did send a couple out to places in Georgia and Alabama, but they were smaller markets, so my heart was set on like a Fort Myers or a Jacksonville, which is like market, it's in the 40s. I can't remember exactly where Jacksonville is now, but pretty lofty ambitions for someone who is not on TV. But Fort Myers was market 62 or 63 at the time when I got there. So mid-sized market, not too far from home. I could drive from Fort Myers. And another thing that influenced me was I wanted to be driving distance because I was married and my husband was staying here. So again, that goes back to how family and being a woman, it kind of changes things a little bit in this business. But they were the ones who offered me a job because I interviewed at all 3 stations in Fort Myers, and Wink is the one that offered me the opportunity with the freelancing component. When I was like, really? Now I have to freelance too? But it worked out.
Going back, you said you wanted to always come back to Miami. Was that because of you knew that there would be work here, or you just like Miami for the sake of it being a city that you love?
The most fun news town. And all the stories that come out of here are very, very exciting. And there's never a dull moment. And sometimes, we report on stuff that people are like, we can't believe they're reporting on Justin Bieber. It's like, well, people watched because our ratings were really good that night. So it's just the things that only in Miami or Florida stories that people say, like, you get that here. And it's a lot of fun. There's never a dull moment. I don't have the traditional desk job of just sitting there, and you meet all kinds of new people, and especially here, a variety of people from all over the world live here. But a big part of it was family, and I wanted to be back close to family. Not to say that I will be here forever, because of course I'd love to work for the network one day and move on to bigger and better things. But for right now, I knew that I always wanted this to be a stop along the way.
Sorry.
Actually, what you just said, you want to move on to bigger and better things. I want to ask you, what is the next step for you career-wise? Like, where do you project yourself in like 10 years or so?
10 years? I'd love to be a correspondent for one of the networks, a cable network, a broadcast network, doesn't matter. But I would love to just have the opportunity to travel and to report on things outside of sort of the bubble that I've become accustomed to. I know that it will be challenging because if I have children and leaving, that's a hard thing to do. But I ultimately see myself doing that. I'd love to do things in the political spectrum if I can. I've gotten a lot of experience down here with our colorful politicians. So I think that would be an interesting route to take, something a little bit more investigative, in-depth, having to do with politics. So maybe DC, New York.
Are you bilingual?
Yes.
Would you jump over to like I'm assuming Spanish? No?
My Spanish is not that good. But I can understand it and I could speak it. I just don't think I would, going to the nervousness thing,
Yeah.
I would be so nervous every single time that little tally light turned on. But that's another path that people can take. I have another friend who her first job right out of college was at the Univision in Orlando. So top 20 market, fresh out of college, but perfect Spanish, beautiful girl, and she got this great job. And then I want to say after 2 or 3 years, she transitioned to the NBC, to WESH in Orlando. So she's in the same market, and now she's in English. So that's another way that people can get to where they want to be. If you're good at Spanish, practice that.
Do you recommend that journalism students go to graduate school or no?
Can I plead the fifth? I mean, to me, I would love to go just because I loved school. I love college. I love the atmosphere of the learning environment, and it's just fun. And I loved Gainesville, so I mean, I don't know if I'd go back to Gainesville. I could come here, but I think it would go, if you want to go, it would has to be because you just feel like you want to go, and it would just make you feel fulfilled to have that. Maybe you want to be a professor one day, something along those lines. But do you need to go to graduate school? No. But I know people who have. I know, was it John Stossel? I can't remember. I think he went to Princeton for psychology and then went to graduate school for journalism because he didn't study journalism undergrad. So some people I see that they do that, and that's great too. I know a lot of friends of mine who studied PR and then went to journalism school for their master's and then went back to working in PR anyway. So it just depends. I don't think that if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think it gets you more money out of the gate, but I could be wrong, speaking as someone who doesn't have her master's degree, so maybe I'm just bitter. I don't know.
What about technology? How is it affecting the job market as we go forward?
My career has grown in the era of technology, so pretty much from the get-go I had Twitter and Facebook and all the different blogs. I think as far as the job market goes, technology has given people a chance to market themselves better. It's all about using that to your advantage. I mean, you all know employers are Googling you and checking your Facebook pages if they can, checking your Twitter accounts. So why not just have a really great Twitter account where you're linking to all kinds of news stories and maybe putting up little clips. Let's say you're somewhere and you witness a car crash on Biscayne and you hop out and you take some video, you do a little blurb there and you post it to your Twitter account. Like, that's the best marketing you could do is for yourself right then and there, and this is the opportunity to have that sort of go viral because of the accessibility of Twitter. And if you have lots of Twitter followers, people are impressed by that these days. So even if you may think you're not saying anything important, someone might think you are. So I definitely think as far as marketing yourself, technology is a big help. It's also, as far as finding stories, I'm talking about sources, it helps you find that jumping off point of, a friend of mine was talking about this on Facebook, that there's this tree in Coral Gables that they're thinking of cutting down. Oh, that might make a good story. People are so upset about it. So you can get ideas like that. So I think it's definitely helped. People just need to embrace it.
Has anybody done a spot entirely on a phone, shot it on an iPhone, edited it on an iPhone?
Google Gio Benitez. Have you ever heard of Gio Benitez? Did Gio come to FIU?
Yes.
He came here, right?
Yeah.
He did, I want to say, his first assignment ever on Channel 4. This was when the iPhone 3 came out. He's a tech guy. He was working as a producer at Channel 4 and the news director at the time. This is secondhand story here. Sent him out saying, get interviews, do all that you can, shoot video on the phone and put together a story. He put the whole story together on an iPhone. And I want to say one of his claims to fame is that he was the first person really to ever do that. And when the 4S came out, or 5, or one of those phones, he did the same thing, and they just keep getting better and better, and he's great at it. And now he's at ABC Network doing amazing things. So it worked out for him.
He was actually my lab partner in biology class.
There you go, biology. There you go. Yeah. So he's doing very well. He is a CBS 4 success story. We are proud to know him.
Hi, my name is Jay. I'm a non-traditional PR student, and I wanted to ask this question a little earlier. When you talked about publishing a story on Justin Bieber, and the reaction for some people was, I can't believe they published this. I wanted to ask, where do you guys draw the line or decide when to put a story out that's not necessarily newsworthy, or better yet, with traffic, with the local politics, but nonetheless people are talking about it? I'll give you a great example. I have the CNN app, and they send you breaking news. One of the breaking news was what was it? Family Guy, the dog dying, and that was breaking news for them. And even other things I get, I'm like, this is not news at all. So where do you guys draw the line or decide, although this is not local traffic, local politics, people in the neighborhood, but people are talking about it, and you still feel like you want to write about it? Where do you guys draw that line? For example, like Justin Bieber, where do you guys decide that we should still go ahead and do it or not?
I will be honest and say I don't know the answer of where to draw that line, because it's not my decision at the end of the day. I'm the reporter, so I come in and they say, oh, you're covering Justin Bieber today. And I say, oh. And then they send me out to Miami Beach to stalk him until he comes out of the hotel. But if it's something people are talking about, it's going to get some coverage, whether that's A block coverage, B block coverage, a package with team coverage, or if it's going to be a quick VO. That really just depends on the nature of the story and the producers and what else is going on that day. Because I mean, if something else crazy had happened the day that Bieber was arrested, Bieber's arrest could have been the bottom of the A block, a quick little blurb. Oh, by the way, Justin Bieber arrested in Miami today, or Miami Beach. But it was the biggest story of that day. Right. And sometimes the biggest story of the day is a dull dud. But it is what it is, so that's what you report on. That's more of a news director, producer, assignment manager kind of question. I know there are certain things that I will leave out of stories, because as a reporter our job is to be the gatekeeper of information. Sometimes it's like, this is not relevant to the point I'm trying to make. Like some people in the Justin Bieber coverage, they'd call him like pop punk or something. And it's like, oh, why do I need to call him a pop punk? That's not, who am I to say that? So it's just kind of like, 19-year-old Justin Bieber did X, Y, and Z, or this is what he is accused of having done. Right. So that's kind of, the reporter has the control over what they put in their one story. As far as the overall coverage, that's a whole team of people back at the station who get paid the big bucks, so I don't know.
Have you ever declined a story saying, I don't like this, I'm not getting into this?
I haven't in my short career, I have not. But I know there are people who've been in the business for a long time who've said, I'm not going to cover that story. Right. I hope to one day feel comfortable enough in my journalism chops to be like, no, I don't think so. But as of right now, no.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm the dean of the school, so thank you for being here. I really appreciate you for taking the time and coming here and talking to the students. I think it's incredible the work that the center is doing. We live in Copenhagen ahead of it, and the fact that we have this kind of opportunity for somebody like you to come and talk to the students. So my question for you would be, and I apologize if you have talked about that already, but in your career, do you remember a stumbling block or an obstacle that was in your way? It could have been a gender-based obstacle, or could have been something else completely different, and how you overcame that particular obstacle, and if you get any insight to tell us about that situation. And also, as we look into the future, and we are trying to prepare the students for this changing environment and this changing media with technology and everything else, what are the, if you could anticipate what one of the biggest obstacles would be for them, and what could they do to prepare to overcome that?
The first part of your question, as far as what was an obstacle for me and what was in my way, I was in my way. I just was so set in, this is how the job market or the job hunt should go. I should graduate from college and have my job in TV and all will be great. And I let myself get hung up on that for too long, as far as not exploring other opportunities and other options, and realizing again that everyone has their own path, and it's going to look different. For what one person might do is going to be different than what I do. And I had a lot of trouble when I was working here in radio right out of college, and I would watch the local news, and I was just upset. I would watch these people and I'd be like, why is that person on TV and I'm not? Once I finally let that go and just realized, that's them, good for them. This is what I need to do for me. I was just a much happier person. I wasn't such a depressed 22-year-old, but And then I was open to other opportunities. I was open to the idea of becoming a full-time reporter on radio and then anchoring and then moving on to TV in a smaller market, not where I had originally hoped to be, but I loved my time at Wink. I would not trade it for the world. Best boss I had there. He gave me so many opportunities, and looking back, I can't imagine not having done that for myself. So really my obstacle was me. As far as the obstacles that technology might create for up and coming journalists, I'd say there's just so much misinformation out there on the internet, on blogs, on people tweeting things from fake accounts that look like the real account, but they're really the parody account. So I sometimes see that as being a stumbling block for people. They're so anxious to be first before it gets on Twitter or right after it gets on Twitter that then they're wrong. So I definitely see that as being a problem that we're going to be dealing with for the foreseeable future. I mean, with the Boston bombing, people reporting that someone was in custody when no one was because they wanted to, and then other people were tweeting that saying, "Oh, we confirmed." Who'd you confirm it with? It wasn't true. So I think that is going to be an interesting obstacle that hopefully people will quickly learn to overcome, because it could be a really great resource and a useful tool if you know how to harness the power of technology correctly.
You know, talking about technology, to what extent journalists are looking at new media or social media to begin something? Is it part of your routine these days?
What
to
do you
look
mean?
at bloggers,
Oh,
for
yeah.
example,
All the time.
and to certain
Mhm.
tweet accounts?
A photographer who works at our station, he believes that Twitter is only used by journalists. He's like, it's just journalists wanting to see what other journalists are doing. Like, we want to know what their lead is at 5, so we follow all their reporters to see if they tweet, "Oh, we have an exclusive." So I think that in this profession, Twitter is a huge tool for people to kind of keep tabs on what other stations and other outlets are doing. Facebook, to me, is a great way to keep in touch, like, really with the community. I follow, or I have a bunch of friends, and then I have my professional page, so that way I can just accept anybody. But even just on my personal page, where it's my grandmother and my aunt and some friends from college, I could see what they're talking about and what interests them, and that creates stories all the time. But I think different media, different usage. I mean, Instagram is great because we pull pictures from that all the time. We courtesy them and source them. Mm-hmm. So it makes the news gathering process a little bit easier and harder at the same time, because there's so many places where you can be getting information from, like the Justin Bieber story. Keep going back to this. But, oh, Justin Bieber tweeted this. He hadn't said anything yet, so we took that one tweet and made that the statement. Oh, but he also posted this picture of him on Instagram next to a picture of Michael Jackson. Oh, we need to use this too. So it became overwhelming how much social media components we had to use, and then his dad tweeted something, and it was just never ending. So sometimes it's a double-edged sword, because it gives you all this great information, but you need to, one, make sure it's really them posting all these things, and that you don't make your whole story just a bunch of tweets and Instagram photos and Facebook posts.
Thank you.
I have a question. Do you think as a reporter you have the obligation to be a good role model? Because I once met a guy, I like to do sports, and he's from Channel 7, and I was like, oh, how do I get into sports? He's like, you're pretty, you'll get there one day. So I don't see him the same now, because since he treated me that way, I don't even like to look sports in his channel, because I'm like, he was mean. So I think as a reporter you should, I don't know, be nice to who you're approaching, but I know not everyone's like, it's not like that, so I don't know.
As a person, you should just be nice.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there's that added responsibility to be a good, not even role model, but just to present yourself in a way to always remember you're representing your employer. When even on my personal Facebook page, which not everyone can, I don't post anything inappropriate, and I don't post bad words and things like that. Not to say that I don't use them sometimes, especially in a newsroom. If you've ever been in a newsroom, you know that there are lots of bad words. But it's your responsibility, I think, to at least present yourself in such a way that shows dignity and respect for others, and respect for yourself and for your brand, because you're a brand, your station is a brand, and I'm sorry he said that to you, that's not nice. But you are, so that's a good thing.
No, but since that day, I see things differently
Yeah.
because I feel that as a reporter, you have to be a role model, give back to the community. And when some people don't do it, it's like they just do their job and that's it. And I think as a reporter, you have an extra responsibility since you're talking to the community. You know.
And getting involved as a reporter is great, not just because it's a nice thing to do to give back to the community, but it's also a way to get out into the community and meet people you probably wouldn't otherwise meet. And at the end of the day, your job is telling stories, and you could probably get some good stories from these people who you never would have approached to begin with. I spoke at a United Way of Broward event on Saturday for a group of young kids, the Broward Youth Coalition on Saturday. A group that I'd never been a part of before. I didn't really know what kind of work they were doing. And I left with all kinds of great story ideas after talking to them because they're a great group of kids trying to make a difference in their community. And just for me taking a half an hour out of my Saturday, probably have like 2 or 3 possible stories that I could do in the future.
Okay, we will take one last question because we're running out of time.
You mentioned that you would like to reach the point where you can decide what stories you can cover or not. So what kind of stories you would not cover?
Justin Bieber. I'm just picking on him. I can say the stories that I would like to cover just because it would not, it really just, it depends on the day. I mean, there could be a shooting, and I don't want to cover a shooting all the time. We could be covering those every day in Miami, but at the end of the day, we have so many that I probably will never get to a point where I could say, I don't want to cover that shooting, I'm sorry. I would like to cover more political corruption, more investigative types of stories, things that aren't just day of pieces. I'd like to get to the point where I could be like, oh, Lauren's taken this week, she's working on something special. And on the other hand, if you're a general assignment reporter, which I am now, I could be live at something on a story at 5 and 6, and then at 11 I'm on a different story, and I never got to give my opinion at all. I just go where they tell me, and I say, send me the address. So I'd like to be in a position where I pitch stories that they don't want to take me off of to send me to breaking news, if that makes sense. That I go into our afternoon meeting or our morning meeting if I'm ever working during the day, and I have this wonderful story idea that doesn't matter if Miami is exploding all around us, Lauren is staying on that story because it was so good. So that's kind of the goal for me every day, to come in with a great pitch that will really wow my bosses, wow the viewers, and keep me from having to do silly breaking news.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Lauren Pastrana, for the insightful and inspiring, I would say, talk. And see you in our next seminars and webinars, and just keep watching for our emails.
Thank you.
All right.